All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Post Game Podcast, a podcast where I'm talking to former athletes about life after the game, what they're up to in business, entrepreneurship, and much more. Today's guest with episode number 82 of the podcast is the founder of 5-Star Hiring. He spent the duration of his career at JG Wentworth before ultimately starting his own recruiting firm with a focus on helping student athletes and former athletes land jobs. What he was discovering is that while there are recruiters for every profession, there's a ton of recruiters out there, nobody was really doing an incredible job of targeting one of the most valuable candidate pools, student athletes. So his name is James Grugan. Awesome having James on. He's doing an awesome job going around to a lot of local schools, universities, high schools, just talking about careers and what they can do to put themselves in the best positions. James, I think if there are kids out there that might be listening to this or anybody who's looking to land that next job, definitely going to be valuable for them. A little bit of what we talked about are some practical job search strategies, why a very small percentage of applicants do one thing that sets them apart. We talked about crafting a resume that can get noticed, and then why James believes that your athletic experience might be better than a traditional internship. So again, James, great having you on, man. Just appreciate you sharing your expertise in the space here. And I think folks out there can enjoy this one. So please enjoy this conversation with James Grugan. James Grugan, thanks for coming on, man. Looking forward to, just hearing about 5-Star Hiring, kind of how you've been helping specifically a lot of student athletes. We connected in person like a month ago, 2 months ago or so. So
right now, yeah,
man.
Flies.
Yeah. So
Flies.
yeah, it does fly. Summer flew by, but yeah, man, thanks for coming on and just excited to host you and just share what you got for people.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I'm probably as excited as you are to be here. I love what you're doing. Kind of very similar things, right? Just doing whatever we can to help student athletes and former student athletes in any way, whether it be while they're in school or transitioning out of school. We're just looking to help them take advantage of the competitive edge that they have and kind of identify that for them and help them, with that next step.
Yeah, sure, man. So yeah, and that's the goal. With some of these conversations, like hopefully somebody, if there's one person out there that is like, oh, all right, this is going to help me better navigate finding a job or whatever it is, hopefully can help. So yeah, man. So just a little bit of your background, because I know you spent a lot of years with JG Wentworth, correct? Like, so you've been in the recruiting industry for, well, I'm not going to date. We're just talking about that jersey above your head, but you have a lot of experience in the recruiting industry. So I'm kind of curious, from spending all the time with JG Wentworth, like an awesome bigger company, that what was it for you that made you break away and start your own company with 5-Star Hiring?
Yeah, I get that a lot, Joe. And really what it was, so, JG Wentworth is primarily, it's a financial services company, and the majority of my time there, and like you said, we don't want to date me, so we won't say exactly how many years there, but it was a lot. The majority of my time there was more kind of on the financial services side of it, boring type of stuff. And then, I got into the recruitment side of it later on. And that really kind of reignited a passion for me that had been gone for so long. And when you're at a job for that long, it kind of just becomes mundane and routine. And the recruiting side of it really relit my passion. And early on, what I noticed, and it started out kind of as doing a favor for a college basketball coach and getting former student athletes jobs. But what I noticed quickly was that they were desirable candidates, and they comprised a candidate pool that not just employers or hiring managers like myself, but in various industries were looking for. But when I started to look at the recruitment space, I saw that there was recruiters dedicated to almost every profession. You name a profession, there's a recruiter specifically recruiting that industry. However, nobody doing that specifically for student athletes, which I thought was odd, because here it is, this valuable candidate pool, but nobody targeting it. And then the other thing that really kind of, I would say, took this from an idea for me to something where I was like, okay, I need to do this. There's a real need there. What was, in talking to former student athletes, what I realized was a lot of them said, I understand that I was acquiring these skills now, but at the time I was living it and going through it, I didn't quite understand it. And I wish I had somebody to kind of educate me and mentor me and walk me through that process while I was living it, as opposed to kind of learning about it later. And that's where I realized, that there is a need there for student athletes to help them identify these skills that they're acquiring, and then navigate them through a very difficult job market, job search process.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when you're in it, you don't really realize that like basically everything you're doing as an athlete, as a student athlete, you're waking up at 5 a.m. for workouts, you're going to class, then you're going to practice, then you're going back to class, you're trying to fit a meal in between. It's like so many of those things are super translatable, man. So yeah, it's great that that's kind of the niche that you've broken into. For you, before we kind of get into some other stuff, just the business side of it, like how did you go about setting up the business, like becoming an entrepreneur? Did you reach out to your immediate network? Like what were some of those first steps to get to that point?
Yeah, that was, I want to say difficult, but really in hindsight, it wasn't as difficult as you can imagine. And it's funny, it kind of goes back to a lot of the things that I preach to student athletes is building out your network. Like that's something you should be focused on early on in your collegiate career, is starting to build out a network. And that was one of the first things that I did, Joe. We talked about me being at my company for so long. And in being there so long, you create a network. And a lot of people have, when I left, I was the longest tenured employee there. And so you can imagine that during that time, a lot of people came and went on to, start their own thing or move into more senior leadership positions at new organizations. And they were some of the first people that I tapped into and brought them on as clients. And to their credit, Joe, believe it or not, and this is, we talk about kind of even how we got connected, wanting to just help people, which is another thing that I say. People want to help people, right? They just need to know what kind of help you're looking for. A lot of those former colleagues reached out to me. I put it on LinkedIn that I was starting my own business and what I was doing. And some former colleagues had reached out that, hey, I think this is great. I'm happy to see you doing well. We can use some space, some help in that space with our hiring. Let's connect. And that's really how I got the ball rolling. And a lot of businesses struggle in year one. It was one of my better years, to be honest with you. And that was just from the network that I had created, during my career.
It's true, right? People do want to help people. A lot of times you don't make the ask though, right? Because you're like, I don't want to bother this person, or I don't want to do this or that. I'm guilty of that for sure. So I got to do a better job at it. But you mentioned LinkedIn. So this is an avenue that you've gone the social media route, if you want to call it that, like just kind of promoting yourself. And maybe if you could just touch on that, like, are there any things that, because it's tougher when you're a student athlete, because you're at the school. It's like, maybe I don't have the time, number one, although you can make the time, but what are you going to put out on LinkedIn? But just from your perspective, like, how do you use LinkedIn as a tool? How are you thinking about other social medias? Yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, let me first, before I talk about how I use it, let's talk about, because you had started to mention how student athletes can use it. And they always have the time. We certainly know they have the time for other social media platforms. And a lot of it's copy and paste, right? If you're posting something on another platform, you could just simply copy and paste that and use the same or a similar version of it on LinkedIn. But even if you don't have the time or don't feel that what you're posting is quote unquote like LinkedIn worthy, right? Like professional, it doesn't fit that platform. Still be active on there as a student athlete in terms of growing your network, which is connecting with your school, with your professors, alumni associations, coaches, teammates, things like that. And just even if it's liking or commenting on others' posts, that starts to build you out on that platform, so that when you need it as you go to graduate, and it's then more than just a job board for you. It's a real platform which you have a real network that you could begin to tap into, and recruiters see that. I oftentimes will, when I'm looking to fill a position, use what's called LinkedIn Recruiter, and it's kind of like a backdoor version of LinkedIn, which lets me message candidates who are on LinkedIn. But if I'm only getting a limited number of messages that I can send on a monthly basis, I'm not going to use one on a profile that I see that hasn't been active since it's been set up, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean just posting. I can see if you're liking, if you're commenting, those different kinds of things. So if I see that, I'm more likely to reach out to you. So if you want to be, considered a viable candidate from a recruiter, just be a little active on there.
Definitely. Yeah. Be active. You can also get creative, right? With a few different ways. Like, I was just on a call earlier with somebody, and they were talking about either sending a voice memo, or because they were talking about the follow-ups, right? Which is something that we'll get into at one point, hopefully later. But like the follow-ups, especially now with AI, it's like you can tell when something is super like polished and somebody's reaching out to you cold, and you're like, all right, this is definitely not even a real person. But if you almost just get creative with a couple different ways to follow up, and there's that intent behind it, then people feel that, right? So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll definitely talk about that later. Yeah.
Oh, you want to get into that later?
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think the best way to follow up is to be authentic. Like if you're reaching out to, let's say to me, right? Because, I get these a lot, and the automated ones. Hey, James, I think it's great the work that you're doing with student athletes. And then right after that, it just immediately goes into something that you could tell is a canned pitch, right? If you're going to outreach, hey, James, I think it's great that you're doing work with student athletes, as an athlete myself, and I'd love to connect and find out some things that I could be doing, or reference a specific post that I made, or something like that. But just make it authentic and genuine, and people will be able to tell, what's a canned outreach and what isn't.
For sure. Definitely, man. I agree with you. So how about let's talk about going to some of the schools that you've, I know there's something we want to touch on, just like going around to some schools. I've seen on Instagram and everything, there's like some of the partnerships with the Delco baseball page, which I don't know those guys personally, but it seems like they've really done a good job just promoting like local athletes, that type of stuff. So for you've gone to a lot of local schools, Wilmington, Westchester. How did that originate really? And then like, what's the message when you're going out to, because you have a presentation that you put in front of these kids, right? So we'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. So I do have a presentation. It's called Going Pro. And essentially what I do on these visits is I walk student athletes through the first identifying the skills that they acquire as transferable skills, right? What I tell them is that your student athlete experience is your internship. And if you can convey it properly to a hiring manager, you can demonstrate that not only is it on par with a traditional internship, but it may supersede it. And what I mean by that is the skills that you're acquiring, your work ethic, your time management, motivation, resiliency, teamwork, all of those things are the soft skills that employers are looking for. And in a very competitive job market that we have right now, if you can demonstrate that you're bringing immediately transferable skills to an organization, then that's going to be an organization that wants to bring you on board and make an immediate impact, right? So that's the first thing we talked about, is their transferable skills. And then we teach them how to communicate that. We teach them how to network, like we briefly touched on, LinkedIn, for example, how to in-person network. We talk about social media literacy, and making sure you have a clean social media presence on those other platforms that may be considered a little bit more, relaxed, if you will. So some people, I think, get too relaxed on there and share too much, and could hurt their brand, or their employability. Right. So we talk about the importance of a social media presence. And then the typical career development stuff. We, resume writing, interview prep, interview follow-up, all of those different kinds of things. But what's unique about what we do and what we talk about from a career development standpoint, and this is, I think, something that would be important for schools to understand, is it's specifically tailored to the student athlete experience. So when we go to a school, when we go to like a Wilmington or a Westchester, and we're talking to those student athletes, we're teaching them how to navigate the job space, specifically tailoring it to their student athlete experience.
Makes sense. What are some common questions that come up from the student athletes then?
I think a big one is, and this is why I stress it, is, I don't have the work experience, or maybe I'm how are these skills transferable if I don't have the work experience? How do I make a resume have enough information on there to tell my story if I don't have any work experience? Those type of things. And so we can build out your resume to where it shows your athletic experience as transferable work history, or we talk to them about how to sell those experiences in a way that a hiring manager will see that it's relatable. One of the other, you talked about my social media presence, right? One of the things that I'm doing right now is on about a weekly basis, I'm putting out a video answering 70 difficult interview questions. And I'm not going to go through all 70, but there was a viral tweet not too long ago that identified 70 difficult interview questions. And what made me want to create the video was 9 of the top 10 or maybe 15 of the top 20 are things that I directly discuss with student athletes on how to answer in an effective way, whether you have relevant work experience or not, right? So there are some of the things that are of immediate value. Like I'm literally giving you a game plan, a blueprint on how to interview and how to communicate that your athletic experience is a transferable skill set.
Yeah, man. I mean, what is a better teacher than what we talked about earlier? Like having to go, you don't have time to go to get an internship and that kind of stuff because it's a full-time job, and you're playing on a team. Like pressure. Nobody talks about the like pressure situations you're put in, that kind of stuff, and just dealing with all that. That it's impossible to replicate in an office setting unless you're maybe getting up and giving a presentation, that kind of thing. That'll get the juices flowing a little bit. But aside from that, like it's kind of competition against yourself more so, if that makes kind of sense. So yeah. Obviously I'm a huge,
and that's one that's kind of undervalued, right? It's that performance, not just learned in a classroom or written on a resume. It's performed and applied in real life practical situations. And it's many different things, but one of the ones that you just mentioned is performing under pressure, making decisions under duress, quickly compartmentalizing things and prioritizing them and identifying in which order they need to be completed. And all of these things are done routinely, daily, and is something that maybe if you don't have that real life experience, it's going to be difficult to translate what you just learned and applied it. Whereas student athletes have already applied these skill sets. And that's why I say they're ready to make an immediate impact.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Agree with you. Yeah. Failure. I mean, I've failed a lot playing.
You're a baseball player, right? It's predicated on failure.
Now, if I failed a little less, I would have maybe played after school. but no, man, it's so true. So like, what about, so the big thing that you hear is especially being a student athlete, that sales is a great route to go, right? And it is like, I work in a sales role now, and yeah, it's awesome. Is that really where you encourage kids to look, or are there other avenue or other industries that you kind of say, hey, maybe take a look at this? Like, how do you approach kids thinking where they want to go? Yeah.
I try not to encourage anyone. I don't think it's my place or my responsibility to kind of tell you what to do with your life. Now, I will suggest that for student athletes or really any job seeker, recent grad, who may not have a clear direction, right? Again, especially student athletes, because their sport has been so much of their identity and so much of their focus that maybe they hadn't had a chance to consider what they want to do, post playing. Sales is good for people that fit that mold, not just because of the competitive side of it, and probably a bigger part of it is the resiliency. You have to be extremely resilient in an entry-level sales role. You're going to have to overcome a lot of adversity and all those kind of things, but not just for that. But I think sales is a great first job for a lot of people, in that it teaches you the industry in a way that no other role can. Like if you're an accountant, you just get in and you kind of learn that side of the business. If you want to really excel in a sales role, you need to learn every side of the business so that you can properly inform your client and pitch and sell that product, right? So sales is a great way to really learn an industry and learn how companies operate. And I don't say that because I get a lot of sales roles. I do, but I'm not going to put somebody in a sales role that I don't think belongs or will do well in that role. But if you look at the Fortune 500 CEOs, somewhere along the lines of 90% of them started in sales roles.
Yeah, man. It's it's funny. Like there was a kid yesterday that stopped by. He was going around door knocking. Now I'm sure those aren't. Maybe they are. I don't know if those are any jobs you have, but it's door knocking, selling bug, like pest control stuff or something like that. Mm-hmm. And he's out back and he's just kind of walking me. He's talking me through. I'm like, I really appreciate what you're doing. And I didn't end up getting it from him because I'm like, all right, we're good. I don't mind if there's a couple ants in my backyard, but he was a really likable kid. And the resilience part that's kind of what I'm trying to say is like, again, the failure, and you got to keep going back. And if you're not resilient, you're not going to do very, very well in it. So yeah. But what about for the kid? What about just like finding that job? We've talked about it a little bit. We've talked about the LinkedIn networking, but what are some of those practical steps from there? So there's a kid in Westchester listens to the Going Pro presentation, and then he's like, all right, what next? What are the 1, 2, 3 things that I can do to put myself in the best position to get a job?
All right, let's see if I can put them in. I'll see if I can do it in 3 steps.
It doesn't have to be chronological, yeah, but I'm just curious.
The first thing that you should do is you should have a polished, like clean resume, right? It should be in the proper format with the proper. Joe, I posted this like 2 weeks ago. I reviewed maybe 50 resumes over the course of a week. 3 of them were strong candidates, except for the fact that it didn't have their contact, no phone number, no email address. Like, what's the point of a resume if you're not going to have that basic information where I can follow up with you after you apply for the job, right? So the first thing is you have to make sure that your resume is going to be attention grabbing, right? The second thing is you want to research the companies that you're applying for. If you're applying, jump in.
Can I just stop you real quick? The resume. So what makes a good resume? Because I know that today it's a lot of these, unless it's with a relationship, right? That it gets put to the top of the pile.
Well, that's the networking piece. You should always,
right. Sure.
That's number one.
So that's number one, right?
Right.
All right.
Yeah, number one's always networking, always building relationships, because as great as these tips are, and as good as I like to think I am at my job, at the end of the day, nothing's going to be more beneficial to you than having a relationship inside those walls. So that's always going to be number one.
Right.
Absent that, if you're doing it, on kind of your own merit, if you will, and really need to stand out. What a good resume to me looks like is your contact information up top, maybe a brief summary, and then followed by, in this order, your education, right? It's an entry-level role, so you want your education up top. You want your major up top. That's what the companies are looking for. Don't make them go looking for it. And then that's going to be followed by your relevant work history. The bullet points within that relevant work history, when possible, you should quantify your accomplishments so that employers can see your direct impact on the organization. Additionally, what that's going to do is you're going to have some numbers, percentages, those kind of things now on the paper, which when a resume is being scrolled through very quickly is going to be a little bit of attention grabbing. It's going to get them to stop their scroll and see what it is that you did. And then lastly, and again, this may seem simple, is how you save it. So, you have a pretty uncommon last name, as do I. Yours is a little more difficult to pronounce, but neither one of them are common. So if somebody wants to go find my resume after the fact, it's going to be a lot easier to find Grugan.James or James.Grugan than it is resume 25, right? So that's how you should save it. If you save it, it might be your only resume 25. But when an employer is going through resumes, they're going to have hundreds, if not thousands of them, right? So don't make it any more difficult for them to find you than it needs to be.
Okay. So I guess kind of in a way of what you're saying is that it's you can either get yourself out of the conversation pretty early by doing some of these things, like sending a resume 25 over. Yeah, I'd probably be like, all right, this kid didn't even take the time to, to change the name on the PDF file that he just saved.
Right.
There's also things that you can do to really elevate your resume and just get it in front of people. But
there absolutely is. And another thing you could do to elevate it is, and this is again what you said, a little bit more time consuming, is have a resume for each, maybe not every job that you apply for, but it can't just be a template that you send out there to everyone. Read the job description that you're applying to. And if there are certain things that you've done in your career that are more applicable to that role than another role, then tweak your bullet points or maybe tweak your summary. It has to be authentic and things that you did. I'm not saying to make things up, but tailor it specific to job. Maybe you're putting in certain keywords or skill sets that specific job is looking for and is going to put you in a better light.
Yep, definitely, man. So that's the resume. I was just curious about that because number one's the relationships. I feel like that's as you said, the networking relationships. Like that's something my old man stressed on me years ago, and it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, all right, sounds good, Dad. And then I think you said it in one of your talks you were giving. I was listening to. It's like the worst time to start networking is when you need a job.
It's too late.
It's too late by then. Too late at that point. So yeah, man. But what about after that? So there was resume. You before I cut you off, you were going into another point.
Yeah. So the next thing would be when applying for the jobs. And again, Joe, these are little things, simple things that speak volumes as far as what they can do to separate you. Is sending a quick email to that hiring manager. When a job's posted on LinkedIn, oftentimes it's going to show you who posted the job. If it isn't, you could do a little bit more research and get it to hopefully someone close to the hiring manager, whether it's somebody in HR or somebody within the department that you applied for. But again, I'll go back to when I reviewed 50 to 100 resumes is typically the number that I use. For every 100 applicants that I get, maybe, and this is probably high, believe it or not, 3 to 5 will do that. Will send me, hey, James, this is Joe. I just applied for your account executive position. Read the job description. I think it aligns with my skills and my goals. Love the opportunity to discuss it with you further. Right? What would that take you, Joe? About a minute to type that? But if you're one of only 4 people that sent it, it's going to be one of the first ones that I'm going to review is that resume, and I'm going to probably review it a little bit more closely and give you a little bit more of a benefit of a doubt because you separated yourself from the other 94 to 96% of the applicants. Mm-hmm. So that will be the next thing would be the follow-up after the application is it's a huge separator. And if you're not doing it, you're potentially leaving opportunities on the table. And then the third thing, I guess this is assuming that you get into the process, but is, on the interview side, you have to go into interviews prepared. You have to research the company. If you can, research the interviewer, maybe try and find some common ground, relationships that you may be able to tap into. Mm-hmm. But you cannot go into interviews unprepared.
Which that should be one of the biggest things that translates from sports, especially because, if you're not prepared, like if you don't know who's going to be on the mound or something like that the next day, sure, you can maybe get a couple hits, but if you know that he's going to start you off, there's a deep baseball analogy, by the way, like if you know he's going to start you off with a slider or something like that, maybe you can just put yourself in a better position for the rest of that game. So
no, absolutely, and that's the and I try and stay away from the sports analogies. And I don't want to, come off as corny or anything like that, but a lot of them are true. And, my presentation is going pro. I'm getting ready to release a lot of this information in a 5-day course. And I call that the going pro game plan. And again, not to make the analogies, but you want to go into, as a coach or a player, you want to go into a game without practice, without watching films. This process should be no different. And if you treat it like that, the more attention to detail, the more preparation, the more you're going to separate yourself and create advantages for yourself. You talked about this. This is like next level deep dive, right? And it is. But when you talk about the greats, and I know this may be getting ahead of ourselves, we're talking about entry level jobs, but I'm sure you've seen this clip recently of Glavin, right? They were interviewing somebody talking about no, it wasn't Glavin. It was Maddox. He basically let a guy hit a home run off of him in May because he knew that they were two good teams that were going to play each other in the playoffs, and he was going to be looking for that pitch again that he basically served up to him because the game was over, right? They had a 5-run lead or whatever it was. But that's that kind of next level preparation that he knew what to anticipate down the line, or the legendary stories of Tony Gwynn knowing what he was going to see in his first at bat. He could probably predict the first 3 pitches because he watched so much film on that pitcher, right? And again, I'm not asking you to be Gwynn or Maddox, but a little bit of research really, really goes a long way. And it's apparent to the interviewer who does that research and who doesn't. And there are little things that you can do, look at their social media pages, look at their website, things like that take 15 minutes to a half an hour to learn about the company that's really going to make you stand out in the interview process.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's like the lowest barrier to entry. I mean, it's like if you don't, for sure. So, I was just thinking about this because this is something that has come up before, and you hear these stories that there's like Howie Roseman and I think Goodell, they send a letter to every single NFL franchise or
it was Howie Roseman. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. Howie Roseman did it. Like you just see, that's a totally unique approach as well. And I'm just wondering if you've seen any kids do any, again, these are not to undermine entry-level sales jobs, but like, have you seen any kids take any super unique approaches like that? Or these days you could find somebody's phone number pretty easily too, if you really wanted to. So,
I mean, I know you could find mine, but no, I've had kids reach out to me because they saw, some of my stuff on social media. And again, that's somebody I'm always going to reach out to, even if in their intro, they kind of tell me what they're looking for. And maybe I don't have that opportunity right now. But because they took the time to do that, I'm going to follow up, and I do it myself. I've emailed every school in an hour drive of here, at least hour and a half drive of here, offering my services. And I don't know how well the schools in the area, but there's a lot of them, and unfortunately only a small percentage to this point have taken advantage of it and gotten back to me. But that doesn't stop me from emailing them again and again, and trying to find different people. If different gatekeepers. If I start with the AD and that doesn't work, then we look for somebody who has a role in career development or head coaches specifically, or you go on and on down the line until you find that person who's going to give you that yes or that response, and that's how you get your foot in the door. Whether it's you in your sales role, me in my outreach to schools, or a job candidate reaching out to potential employers. The more you're doing from an outreach standpoint or from a networking standpoint, the more opportunities you're going to create yourself. But it's that resiliency factor, right? You're going to get 100 no's for every one yes, or maybe an ignore, not a no. But you're going to have to do 100 of them to get 1 to 3, or whatever the percentages are. They're extremely low.
Yeah, they're lower than not for another baseball analogy, but I think that's a lot lower than your batting average or something. It's like, if you're making 10, you're making 10 cold call, or if you're making 100 cold calls and you get 10 people on the line, that's pretty darn good.
It's pretty darn good. We'll get you benched, but
get you benched, yeah. Right. But I mean, man, if you can schedule 10 meetings. All right. Anyway, so as we start to wind down, James, thanks, man. Just thanks for some of these. Like, I feel like these are practical tips. I hope so, at least. But
no, let me just real quick. A lot of what we're talking about, we say student athlete this, student athlete that, but many of these things are applicable to just regular job seekers when it comes to that side of it. Now, again, some of the skill set and identifying and selling yourself is going to be specific to the student athlete experience. But as far as like these tips and things that you could be doing, I think any job seeker, particularly on the entry level side, should be doing these things
for sure. And that's kind of just the lens that the lens that I frame it through, just because it's my background. But that's what I was talking to this girl, Kirsten Toth, who's starting this platform like specifically for athletes. You may have even come across it. It's called Free Agent. It's pretty cool. But her point is, like, just because you play or just because you were an athlete doesn't make you better than anybody else. It just means you have different experiences. So she's trying to kind of tie that into the platform that she has. But you're right. It definitely is universal. And that kind of, I did want to ask you about that, just in terms of the job market and searching for jobs in general. Like, we were talking about this a little bit before we were recording, but just the overall job market, because I feel like you see a lot of negative things. It's like, God, it's so the hardest time to get a job, things like that.
And it is. And
is that true? Yeah, is that actually true, or like what is true and false?
Unfortunately, it is, Joe. At least in the Philadelphia region. But I try to be an extremely positive guy. So we're going to talk about the highlights there, right? In an extremely competitive job market right now in Philadelphia, you need to be doing the things that we talked about, right? Sharp resumes, employer outreach, follow-ups, tailored resumes, utilizing your network, all of those different things you need to be doing. But there are certain industries that are thriving right now. Listen up, my St. Joe's guys. All right, St. Joe's has the biggest food and beverage marketing major in the country, and there's an up and coming retailer coming to this area specifically that plans on opening some new stores over the next 5 to 10 years, or whatever the exact numbers are big. So that's a thriving market. If you're a St. Joe's food and beverage major, that's something that you can look into.
I thought all St. Joe's guys just got into insurance. Is that?
I guess some do, but
that's just a joke. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's their biggest major, food and beverage marketing. That's a growing industry, while other industries are shrinking this area. I think an obvious one is the AI industry. If you're into that, if you're skilled at that, lean into that a little bit. That's a growing industry in the Philadelphia market. But I just recently posted about these things. Again, we'll encourage people to get on LinkedIn and find that article where I kind of break down what some of the pain points are in the job market right now, but also where it's experiencing some growth as well.
Cool. All right, that's interesting. So, what about? And just want to ask you two more quick things here, and then we'll wrap. But are there any companies that you have the strongest relationships with, maybe, or that you kind of place? I don't know. I don't know if that's fair to kind of point out one or two, but like, are there specific companies that you partner with that are good places for kids to start looking?
I do. Most of the companies that I work with, they prefer me not to,
that's fair.
The partnership for competitive advantage reasons, or whatever their things are. So when I post a job, for example, it's going to say, my client, this and that. It's not going to specifically list who it is that I'm hiring for. But with that being said, yes, and I do, like we talked about, I do get a lot of sales roles, but I also, and they tend to be hiring on the most regular basis are those sales roles, because there's a lot of turnover in those positions. So I partner with a lot of companies that are looking for sales reps, oftentimes on almost a regular basis. And that's in various industries, whether it's the SaaS space or the financial services space. But I do also partner with some couple marketing firms and a couple accounting firms, and then my they're more so on kind of the regular basis. But I do have companies that will reach out when they're just doing like a one-off type of hire.
Gotcha. All right, good deal. So you're kind of in the middle of, we've got relationships, like you said, you've got relationships with a lot of different partners in different industries, which is awesome. So, all right, man. So last question, like what's next for you? Are you going to continue? Obviously, you want to continue growth of your own business, but the 5-day email class, that's what I wanted to mention to you last. Maybe we can close on that. Just what's the goal with that?
I'm really excited about that, and let's. I think this works out good, Joe. It's kind of full circle. We talked about very early on, like the two of us just kind of wanting to help people, right? To help as many people as possible. And I say this humbly. I wish I can get to more schools. I wish more schools would get back to me when I do the outreach, because I want every student athlete to hear the Going Pro presentation. And that's not selfishly for me. I've had so many conversations with student athletes who just aren't as informed as they should be or could be coming out of school. And this will allow student athletes to experience essentially the Going Pro presentation on a one-on-one basis. It highlights a lot of the same things that I talk about during my presentation, and it's giving it to them individually over a 5-day period. So I'm really, really excited about that. And I'm hopeful that a lot of student athletes take advantage of it. And as far as what's next for me beyond that, I'm hoping to take that and grow that into a full service one-on-one career development, where I can work individually with those student athletes and job seekers who need special attention, whether it's a resume rewrite, an interview prep course, things of that nature that can really help them in their job search, or as they begin to navigate the competitive job market.
Awesome, man. That's great. Yeah, it's needed. It's needed. Like, a lot of athletic departments are great, but there's not as much sometimes guidance for like that next step. That's not to say that's not there. You're also not as maybe receptive. Maybe this is something that you can help kids with too. It's like, you're not as receptive to hearing some of this stuff when you're 19, 20, 21 years old as you are a couple years down the road. So
right.
that's kind of just,
and it's also, I think it's also too, Joe, I don't like to, I'm not discrediting anything that schools are doing. Certainly their career development departments, I think they're all doing excellent work. But where I think we have extra value is that a career development department is again, not that one's better than the other, but they're treating student athletes and their non-student athletes the same. And my program, my presentation, my education is empowering specifically student athletes and highlighting and identifying their skills, their skill sets, their experience, and educating them on how they can communicate that to benefit themselves.
Very cool, man. Well said. So, all right, James. Well, this is great, man. Yeah, I'm glad we could make this happen. Yeah,
I'm really glad we made this happen. Yeah. And I hope we touched on all the points that you were hoping to touch on, and we kind of educated some people, and opened some eyes.
I hope so as well. So if they do want to reach out to you, just give a quick plug to your socials, where to find you.
Yeah, absolutely. So email, I guess would be first. Email is jamesg@fivestarhiring.net. I'm on LinkedIn @JamesGrugan, and all other social media platforms I am on @5starhiring. That's YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and obviously LinkedIn. So nice. they can find me everywhere as @5starhiring or @JamesGrugan on LinkedIn.
All right, good deal. You'll get some TikTok dances that come along with it.
No, again, like I said earlier, it's just the copy and paste. If I'm putting a video on one, I'm putting it on all.
Hey, I'm on there too. I'm trying to figure it out. So, all right.
That sounds good.
All right, man. Thanks.